All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here joined by Dr. Pierce Paul. The idea was to be in the plots, Battle for the Belt, Worcester location. However, it's raining out there. We need a rain, Pierce. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Rain is always good for the crabs.
We are adjusting and we came to his lab and we will be covering a few topics of importance as it comes to disease management in corn and how that relationship can be affected by different planting dates. Um, Pierce, to give you a little bit more of context, we have Battle for the Belt, 5 planting dates this year, all of them completed in Worcester. We started as early as April 22nd, first date, May 3rd, May 21st, June 4th, and the last one went into the ground on June 20th.
Okay.
So we are done planting, but now we have a wide spectrum of stages, wide spectrum of development. The last date has not emerged yet, and on the first date we have corn already at the B8 stage.
Wow.
And everything in between.
And Worcester is one of 3 locations?
That's one of 3 locations. Western location, we are also done planting.
Okay.
We started as early as March in Western, and the last planting date was sometime in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
Northwest Ohio, weather conditions were a little bit challenging this planting season. We are still trying to finish up our 5 planting dates at Northwest.
Okay.
So still work in progress. Besides planting dates, we also have 4 hybrids, 4 relative maturities of corn, 100-day, 107, 111, and 115 days. Okay. That's what we are looking at. I heard you say before in a different meeting, this really gives a huge spectrum of conditions. Environmental conditions, you have stages, susceptibility happening in different periods.
A wider window.
So can you comment a little bit more on that?
Okay. Yeah. So, first of all, I want to congratulate you guys on the effort. I think this is very important. Whatever we find from this study is going to be of great value to our growers and our producers, and important for decision making. And I want to commend you guys also for understanding that disease is an important component of this whole story. And so it's good that you're tracking disease development. And I figure you got some fungicide treatments in the protocol as well. Are you applying fungicides now?
We are not.
Okay, good. Yep. So anything that you do that can affect the environment that occurs at critical growth stages can affect disease development. So planting date effect on disease development is essentially a surrogate for the effect of environment. Early planting, late planting could mean different set of environmental conditions coinciding with critical growth stages. Most diseases that we deal with infect the leaves, the pathogens infect the leaf at critical times during the growing season, and relatedly, the crop is more or less susceptible at a certain growth stage. So if that susceptible growth stage coincide with the time when those spores are available, and that time coincide with favorable environmental conditions, then you're going to likely have disease development. So that is part of the reason why I think this is important. And it's not strictly, for some disease, it's not strictly late planting result in more disease. Early planting can result in more disease if that early planting results in those favorable weather conditions coinciding with when spores are available and when the crop is susceptible. But we've got some exceptions. Tar spot, for example, seems to be a disease that develops best towards the end of the season. That's probably because it's not endemic in Ohio yet. Spores are blowing in from outside, and the longer you go in the growing season, the greater the opportunity of more spores coming in from outside. So this could potentially be one of those diseases that increase in severity and incidence with later planting. And it tends to have a greater impact on yield if it comes in well before the grain fill is complete. So if you shift the planting date later in the season, more spores are coming in before the yield is made, it could potentially impact disease development and impact yield. Graily spot, for a different set of reasons, gray leaf spot likes older leaves. So again, if you move the planting date around and you have those aging of the leaf coinciding with different weather conditions, gray leaf spot infects from those lower leaves up. You're probably going to have more or less, depending on how the age of the plant and how the age of the plant coincides with weather conditions.
Thinking on that, piggybacking on that, Pierce, the disease triangle, right? We need the susceptible genetics,
Absolutely.
we need the pathogen, and we need the right environmental conditions. And by changing all of these planting dates,
absolutely, you increase the chance or decrease the chance, depending on which direction you go, of all of these. For you to have diseases, you must have the perfect storm. Diseases are, thankfully, for non-pathologists, it's an exception, not a rule. So you don't have disease every year simply because you don't have those three things coinciding. But if you open up that window for a given crop in a given season, then more than likely one of those planting dates, one of those maturities are going to occur at a time where you have those three things coinciding. The triangle is pretty important for all of this to happen.
Excellent, excellent. And along those lines, Pierce, we also want to head this conversation towards the prediction tool that you guys have been recently working on. But before we jump into that, do you want to share with our group here what are the main erots that we usually are concerned of here in Ohio?
Okay, so we've got a couple of major erots. We've got Diplodia erot, we've got Gibberella erot, we've got Fusarium erot or cornel rot, and then we've got Trichodorma. Of these, the most frequently occurring would be Diplodia and Gibberella erot. Diplodia would be whitish mold growing on the surface of the ear, and once those ears are severely infected, they become lightweight, mummified. So that's very typical, that's characteristic of Diplodia erot. Gibberella erot, pinkish whitish mold growing towards the tip of the ear because the fungus infects via the silks. So that's what you typically see towards the end here. This is probably the single most important erot in Ohio, simply because one, it has been increasing in frequency over the last couple of years, plus it's associated with grain contamination with mycotoxins, particularly dioxinivalinol, which is commonly referred to as vomitoxin. This is another one of those diseases that could become a problem if harvest is delayed, because even though infections occur during the soaking window, if that corn is standing in the field and not drying down, and you have rain towards the end of the season, you can have more problems with Gibberella erot and vomitoxin. Trichodorma is less of a concern because it causes cosmetic damage to the ear. It's not associated with mycotoxins. And Fusarium erot is a concern as well. It infects and it causes contamination with fumonisin. So those are the three. But the ones we're focusing on in our last 10 years or so of research is Gibberella erot, because it's increased in prevalence in the state, it's increased in severity, and we've got more and more reports of grain loads being rejected because of high levels of vomitoxin or dioxinivalinol contamination.
Okay. Now, when we think or when we talk about mycotoxins, we also have, besides BOM or DON, there are 2 or 3 other ones. Can you list those?
Right. So, like I said, with Fusarium erot, you got fumonisin. Fumonisin is a mycotoxin that's associated with the fungi that causes a group of fungi that cause Fusarium erot. And fumonisin is a problem with horses. Horses are very sensitive to fumonisin. We've got DON, dioxinivalinol, which is a problem for swine. Swine are particularly sensitive. And also associated with Fusarium, with Gibberella erot, is zearalenone. Zearalenone is one that's associated with the same fungus that causes Gibberella erot. It is a false estrogen, meaning that it disrupts the reproductive system of animals if animals consume grain with high levels of fumonisin. You've got, with high levels of zearalenone, you've got H2 toxin, you've got HT toxin, you've got T2 toxin, you've got all kinds of different toxins, but the ones that are most frequently occurring is dioxinivalinol or vomitoxin.
Excellent. And I believe that's the one that you guys have last year, for instance, you have the screening process. First time?
Yes, that was the first time in the state where we've got this large-scale screening. One of my former PhD students, he did a small-scale screening looking at 15 hybrids across 10 locations across 4 years. And we got some very good preliminary results, and that served as a basis for this large-scale screening that we did. We had 80 hybrids planted at 3 different locations, replicated small plots at these 3 locations, and then we inoculated and left some non-inoculated, and we collected data, and it gave us a very good spread of different reactions of these hybrids in terms of vomitoxin contamination.
That's something that we can do. We will be happy to share a link to that report from the major
Absolutely.
screening of last year, 80 hybrids. I was taking a look at the numbers there from as close to zero, and all the way to the 20s.
20 parts per million.
20
That's
parts
the
per
range we
million.
saw. Obviously, it's just 1 year of data, but 2 locations, and some hybrids consistently had grain contamination with vomitoxin above that 5 parts per million. So it tells me that those are probably your more susceptible ones. So we are screening some of those same hybrids again this year, and again to see how consistent the reactions are to vomitoxin contamination.
Excellent. Thank you for all that addition. We know that that's a common question from farmers. Getting those grain loads rejected, that's really a big concern, and we are glad that this kind of work is happening to help lead some of the way moving forward.
Yep, definitely. I think I am grateful for the fact that I can count on the performance trial to get some of the data, and most importantly work with Jason and Stephanie. Given my role as chair, I don't spend as much time out in the field anymore, but I'm glad I have those guys to help me do some of this work.
Excellent. So our last point for today, Pierce, is the prediction tool.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What is the current status, and where do you foresee this going? Where is the direction?
Okay. So the same PhD student I talked about, he screened some preliminary screening of some hybrids, and he also did very fabulous work developing forecasting systems to predict the possibility or probability or the chance of grain being contaminated with vomitoxin. So he developed 11 different models to predict vomitoxin contamination of grain. And what he did, he summarized weather data before silking, because that's when infection takes place, at silking, during silking, and after silking. He looked at different weather patterns, summaries of weather variables, averages over 15 days, number of hours within a certain range over 15 days, number of sequences of consecutive days or consecutive hours with relative humidity above a certain level. So he created a range of over 300 different variables, and then he found the ones that had the strongest correlation with grain contamination with DON or vomitoxin, and then he used that to develop models. So we've got 11 different models, and what we're doing this year is testing the pre-tassel model so that we can use that information to make a fungicide application decision. The model we're using this year is one that uses number of hours of temperature between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. That would be 60, 58, and 68, something like that in terms of Fahrenheit. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. So we're summarizing weather variables during that window, and then we're looking at number of sequences, number of consecutive 6-hour periods with relative humidity greater than 80. We put those together, throw them in a computer software, and it gives us a prediction of the probability of grain being contaminated with vomitoxin. So what we're doing this year, we've got 20 weather stations of our own. We're putting those across the state. And we're also using weather stations that are at the research stations. And we're collecting weather data. All we're asking folks to do is provide us with silking date. And those who want to work on the weather stations, collect and send us the weather data at the time of silking. And then once we receive that data, we're going to run it through our algorithm, and it's going to tell us whether the risk is high or low. And then we inform those people so that they can make a fungicide application decision if they choose to do so.
So it sounds like it's a prediction system that can happen as early as after silking.
Exactly. So it is. We use the silking time as our cutoff for data collection. And we collect data at silking up to 30 days before silking, up to 15 days before silking, depending on the model. And then once we throw that information in the model is going to spit out a probability of high levels of vomitoxin contamination. The probability, for example, is greater than 8. It's a high chance of having vomitoxin. Between 6 and 8 is a moderate chance. Between 4 and 6, intermediate, and so on. So we get an idea of the risk of vomitoxin contamination. I'm excited because we haven't had a chance to validate this model in the field. We did all our statistics and we did our internal validation, cross-validation, but we have not had an independent data set to validate this in the field and to use it as a tool for making fungicide application decisions. So we're excited about the possibility of getting some good data this year.
Excellent.
Ultimately, what we want to do is put that app on a smartphone. So instead of a grower having to track and manage all the weather data, he or she could be standing in our field or his field and use the GPS coordinates to pull down the necessary weather data and run the model. All he or she would need to do is enter the silking date. I'm standing in my field, it's silking today. I put today's date in there and it should be able to pull down weather data and tell me what my risk is. That's the ultimate goal.
Outstanding. And my understanding, that is in the process.
That's in the process. It's a 3-year project. And what we're testing this year is what we call phase 2 of the prediction system. And then phase 3 is where we hope to get it on a smartphone. And it's an automated process where people don't have to worry about summarizing weather data. Just enter your silking date and you're good to go.
Excellent,
Okay.
excellent. We will be looking forward to that. Last question.
Okay.
Team corn or team soybeans?
Team corn every time. Come
There
on. What
you
are you
go.
talking about? What are you talking about? Has to be team corn. Yes. But I'm excited to see what you guys come up with.
Thank you, Pierce. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.